Across the Atlantic went the Grand-Prix circus to the Villnёva circuit at Montreal. At Brabham, Derek Warwick, currently driving for Jaguar at the very top of sports car racing, was brought in to fill De Angelis's sadly empty chair. Warwick had nice things to say about the car, initially anyway.
Driving endurance, you know, the cars are much heavier, much slower under braking, so it's completely different. And then this afternoon in qualifying, I mean, it was just, with the power of the BMW, it was just amazing, fantastic.
The other big story was Christian Danner's block move to Arrows, where Sura's seat had become empty after a bad rally accident. Ozella didn't want to let Danner go. There was a lot of strained laughter on the subject, but it was a change for Danner to be torn limb from limb by men. Journalists who wore summer clothes were making a big mistake. Because it rained like stink, Senna slowed down by about 1 mile per hour. Fabi's Benetton slid along in high-speed contact with the pit wall, demolishing all the pit signal boards, slicing off its own nose and rearranging the front suspension. Then it crushed its rear end against the opposite wall and evened everything out. Blessing the miracle of the modern laminated carbon fiber monocoque module, Fabi stepped out of a car dramatically shorter than it had been only a few seconds before. As he steamed on for the pole, Mansell's moustache was matched by his car when a nifty pair of shockwaves formed in the wet air at each end of his flying wing. During the Sunday morning warm-up, Tom Bay had another crash in his Lola, and this time he hurt his leg so badly that he couldn't race. This was tough on Tom Bay, but once again you couldn't help wondering how much worse it would have been in those days, not long ago, when the cockpit used to crumple if you looked at it.
This is Montreal, scene once again of the Canadian Grand Prix, because we're at that point in the Formula One season when the Grand Prix teams leave Europe behind them and come to North America. Canada this weekend, Detroit next weekend. And so a large crowd has turned out in the June sunshine on this man-made island, the Ile Notre Dame, right in the seaway of the St. Lawrence River. And the World Championship finally poised for this 6th round, with Ayrton Senna currently leading the championship by only 2 points from the reigning champion Alain Prost, and the Williams drivers Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet in 3rd and 4th places. There, the remains of the Expo exhibition still here from when it was held here some years ago, but the cars themselves are the modern technology. And here's the man who's taken pole position, Nigel Mansell, on the crest of a wave of confidence from that superb win in Belgium 3 weeks ago at Spa, his 3rd Grand Prix win, and putting the Williams Honda on pole position very confidently despite a tremendous tussle on Saturday afternoon with Ayrton Senna. We had wet practice on Friday, dry practice on Saturday, and all that this man could do, Ayrton Senna, wasn't quite enough to take pole position. So the Lotus Renault humbled for a change in the battle for pole position, but Ayrton Senna, still the current championship leader, the winner of course in Spain, and still a very determined and competitive man. Here's the other Williams Honda, Nelson Piquet, 3rd fastest, winner at the beginning of the season in Brazil, but not as quick more recently as Nigel Mansell, and I think rather anxious to remind Mansell that he is an ex-world champion. Here's another ex-world champion, in fact the reigning world champion, on the 4th spot in the grid and the faster of the 2 McLaren tags. But while they never seem to be quite as quick in qualifying, they're always tremendously quick and tremendously well set up for the race itself. And once again, they were very fast in the morning warm-up in race trim. Ligier, consistently quick this year, and René Arnoux showing no ill effects of his year off last year after being fired from the Ferrari team. 4th in Brazil, currently 9th in the World Championship, and 5th fastest in qualifying here with the Renault-powered Ligier. 6th quickest, the 2nd of the McLaren tags, Keke Rosberg, another ex-world champion of course, and another man who isn't really terribly satisfied with his results so far this year. 2nd in Monte Carlo, his best outing so far, but he's still 5th in
86. The Labatt Grand Prix of Canada takes place in the city of Montreal. Created 344 years ago by Mr. de Maisonneuve, It's the city that hosted the 1976 Olympics and is populated today by 2.5 million people. On this island of Notre Dame, where in 1967 Expo took place, they've used those roads around this island to create a racetrack. The track, it's called the Villenoeva racetrack, after that great Canadian racing driver who died just a few short years ago. Hello, I'm Jackie Stewart. Welcome to this pre-race report. You know, the mechanics that are working in these cars down there and the race drivers only 3 short days ago flew over the North Atlantic, some 3,500 miles. And in that distance, they changed time by about 6 hours. Now, if you were a businessman making a major decision, your company doctor would probably say to you, don't make that decision for at least 3 days after you've done a transatlantic flight, because of jet lag, because of the time change, because of what your body metabolism is doing. Those people haven't had that privilege. Within about 24 hours of arriving here, they were preparing race cars and driving them in some cases. Now, the split-second decision that can make the difference between life and death are in those people's hands. Now, I, as a racing driver in the past, somehow or other managed to do it because we couldn't afford the time of getting 3 or 4 days in advance of any event just to accommodate time change. Somehow or other, the adrenaline pumping through the body was able to deal with it. But there was a lot of incidents here on Friday and Saturday leading up to this race. In the rain on Friday, we had turbos blow and cars catch fire. Was that because of carelessness and bad preparation, or was it just normal? We had drivers spin out quite often on the wet and slippery conditions. Perhaps that was normal as well. But we also had a few drivers make fairly major errors and come into contact with walls and barriers quite firmly. Was that quite normal? I don't think so. There seemed to be more here in Montreal than there have been in those previous Grand Prix. Perhaps because their time clock in their body is waking up at a different time. They should be sleeping or eating when they're doing something else. Time change does play havoc to people. Now, unfortunately, I'm not able to do the commentary on this Labatt Grand Prix of Canada because of a prior commitment that I have with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. But, of course, you and ESPN will be getting your normal good quality. You're going to have Larry Newber and John Bisignano do that race report and commentary, of course. And we'll be right back after this to introduce them. This pre-race report has been brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
Newber with John Bisignano, and we are just minutes away from the start of the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix, and this is part of the appeal of this course. We are standing adjacent to the rowing course from the 1976 Olympics. Well, on Friday, the weather here was absolutely abominable, and it created, I feel, one of the most exciting practice and qualifying sessions that I've ever seen. But on Saturday, the sun came out, and it created a personal battle between Nigel Mansell and Ayrton Senna for the pole, but it turned out a little different than it has 3 other times this year.
Larry, that battle you're talking about, it's been going on for 6 Grand Prix now. Actually started last year in Australia, but this time Senna tried every trick in the book and some that weren't even in the book, but he could not knock Nigel Mansell off pole position. His first pole so far this year.
Well, I've spent most of the weekend watching practice and qualifying on the monitor, and 2 teams which did not figure into the top 4 at the final qualifying runs were Ligier and McLaren's, but they left a big impression on me. They looked very smooth.
Well, the Ligiers have been doing better every race, and they are now considered a threat by all the other competitors. Now, Prost with the McLaren team. You know, McLaren doesn't spend a whole lot of time on what you call a qualifying setup. They use the time for a race setup. So with Prost in 4th position, he's a full second behind the pole setter, but for a race setup, they know exactly what's going to be happening, and you can watch him coming through that grid.
Well, as you can tell, we are actually on an island, the Ile Notre Dame, and we are just moments away from the start now of the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix, and here is the starting grid. As As we mentioned, pole sitter Nigel Mansell, just 7/100ths of a second faster than Ayrton Senna in the Lotus. Mansell's teammate Nelson Piquet, a former two-time world champion, is third, and defending world champion Alain Prost is fourth. René Arnoux has moved the Leger to fifth on the starting grid this week, and Keke Rosberg, Alain Prost's teammate, is sixth. Gerhard Berger has qualified well again, seventh in the Benetton car, and Jacques Lafitte has taken the other Ligier to eighth. Pat Tracy is ninth. Warwick moves over to that team. He is in 10th. Qualifying 11th, Michele Alboreto. Lots of problems this weekend. Terry Boutsen is 12th. Alan Jones, another former world champion, 13th. And his teammate, Patrick Tambay, is 14th. Bobby goes 15th. Dumfries, which is Senna's teammate, of course, is 16th. Philippe Streff is 17th. Stefan Johansson had a miserable weekend, is only 18th on the starting grid. Grundle is 19th. Nannini 20th. De Chestris 21st. Palmer 22nd. Genzani 23rd. Raffengatter is 24th. And Christian Danner brings up the rear of the field on the 25th position on the grid. We'll be back with the start of the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix right after this.
This pre-race report has been brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
Welcome from Murray Walker to Channel 9's Wide World of Sport for the Canadian Grand Prix. Coming to you from the Gilles Villeneuve circuit on the Ile Notre Dame in Montreal. It's going to be a long, hard, tough race, for although the weather is just about ideal, 70 laps, that's 390 kilometres of this demanding circuit, are certainly going to sort the supermen from the men. It's a unique venue for a Grand Prix, a man-made island in the St. Lawrence Seaway, with a track that's very hard on tyres, brakes and fuel consumption. Just like Imola 3 races ago, the winner will be the man who can achieve the best balance between driving quickly and making his 190 litres of fuel last the distance. Here's Ken Sparks.
Thank you, Murray. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ken Sparks. The Gilles Villeneuve circuit is located on an island called Ile Notre Dame in the middle of the St. Lawrence River in Montreal, Canada. And at 4.41 kilometres, will certainly prove a real test for current leader of the Drivers' Championship table, Ayrton Senna, who's currently on 25 points. A whisker in front of the world champion Alain Prost, then the two Williams drivers Mansell and Piquet lurking in the background, with Keke Rosberg still within striking distance if he can win in Montreal today. Now, the track does not particularly suit any one make of car, although the McLaren's car's fitness and the power of the Williams cars should provide a very interesting tussle. The Lotus, with a mixture of both those qualities, will be looking for a very important win. However, today in practice, let's look at the grid. On front row, Nigel Mansell. Alongside of him, Ayrton Senna. Second row, Nelson Piquet with Alain Prost. And the third row, making up René Arnoux and Keke Rosberg. Alan Jones, improving all the time, is in position number 13. So let's cross to Montreal and rejoin Murray Walker and James Hunt.
Un Grand Prix qui s'annonce passionnant. On va détailler dans quelques instants la grille de départ, alors que vous pouvez apercevoir déjà dans sa monoplace Ayrton Senna, le Brésilien, qui se fait abriter avec un parapluie du soleil. Il va faire très très chaud. Il faudra en tenir compte tout à l'heure au niveau de la résistance physique des pilotes. Des records en tout genre également pour ce Grand Prix du Canada, puisque 38 pays vont relayer les images de la télévision canadienne. Il y aura en tout 74 millions de téléspectateurs. Alors espérons que les 22 caméras dissimulées partout autour de ce circuit de 4 km 410, eh bien, nous donneront un spectacle de première qualité. Véritablement ici, mon cher Didier, c'est le circuit Gilles Villeneuve. On parle énormément de Gilles Villeneuve et on tenait un petit peu à se rappeler ce pilote extraordinaire, ce champion extraordinaire, décédé en 1982, alors qu'au Grand Prix suivant, ici même à Montréal, Didier, vous étiez dans la même écurie que lui.
Circuito Gilles Villeneuve, em Montreal, no Canadá, onde vai realizar-se o Grande Prémio do Canadá, sexta prova do Campeonato do Mundo de Fórmula 1. Estamos a ver as imagens da classificação de ontem, onde a Ayrton Senna não conseguiu melhor do que um segundo lugar na grelha de partida. Apesar de todas estas travagens violentas, o piloto brasileiro conseguiu conservar o carro na pista, mas não conseguiu superar Nigel Mansell, que com o Williams Honda número 5 obteve o melhor tempo da grelha de partida. Assim, na grelha de partida para a corrida que dentro de instantes vai iniciar.
Canada. Et puis on peut annoncer une nouvelle. Le mois prochain, Didier Pironi fera son grand retour à l'intérieur d'une Formule 1 version 1986, une de celles qui va courir ce Grand Prix du Canada. On ne vous dit pas encore laquelle, mais au moins c'est déjà une bonne information, Didier.
Oui, elle est pour le moins un petit peu... on la donne un peu tôt parce que, effectivement, je sais que je ferai des essais bientôt dans une Formule 1 actuelle, sur un circuit actuel, mais je ne crois pas que ce soit une nouvelle aussi importante que ça. Je veux dire, je ferai des essais privés, encore une fois, assez discrets, si c'est possible, et puis à la suite de ça, on verra.
Eh bien, on peut quand même dire que c'est une bonne nouvelle de voir Didier Pironi en pleine forme et qui va donc pouvoir revenir dans une Formule 1. Pour le moment, vous voyez détaillé sur votre écran la grille de départ de ce 6e Grand Prix de la saison. Une grille qui s'annonce explosive puisqu'aux 4 premières places, c'est-à-dire sur les 2 premières lignes, on peut trouver les 4 meilleurs pilotes de la saison. Les 4 qui sont en tête au classement du championnat du monde, les 4 qui ont déjà signé une pole position, eh bien on les retrouve devant, ici, au Grand Prix du Canada. La pole position, elle a été réussie par Nigel Mansell. Hier, le Britannique, en 1 minute 24 secondes, 118 centièmes, a établi un nouveau record du tour en ce qui concerne les qualifications. Nigel Mansell qui se trouvera à côté d'Ayrton Senna sur la Lotus Renault. Alain Prost à l'écran pour le moment dans sa McLaren Tag Porsche qui sera sur la 2e ligne aux côtés de Nelson Piquet. Alain Prost, et c'est important Didier, qui a réussi le meilleur temps ce matin des warm-up ou du réchauffement comme on dit ici au Canada.
Oui, je crois que le warm-up ce matin était très important parce que ça s'est déroulé comme d'habitude d'ailleurs dans les conditions de course avec les pressions de turbo et donc les puissances utilisées pendant la course. Et Alain a réussi un excellent temps. Il est assez optimiste.
René Arnoux, Ligier Renault, homem que se colocou muito bem na terceira fila da grelha de partida ao volante do seu Ligier JS 27. Registrou tempo de 1:25:22 contra 1:24:11 de Nigel Mansell, tempo obtido mesmo na parte final do treino. Hoje, no treino livre, que costuma dar muito boas indicações, este homem que estão aqui a ver, Keke Rosberg, ao volante do McLaren Tag Porsche número 2, foi o mais rápido, seguido do seu companheiro de equipa Alain Prost, com o número 1, o que já se tornou um hábito nos grandes prémios. Em termos de warm-up, o treino livre de meia hora, que costuma dar muito boas indicações de andamento, já que este treino é feito com tanque cheio e em posição perfeita de corrida, inclusivamente com pneus de corrida, os McLaren são habitualmente os mais rápidos. Isto significa que, efetivamente, os McLaren se preocupam menos com o acerto para treino e com a pole position na corrida, para a corrida, exceção feita ao Grande Prémio de Mónaco, onde é extraordinário.
Larry Nuber and John Bizigiano standing by for the start of the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix. The Big Five of 1986 are here, of course, as they are. There is the remains, or at least some of the remains, of a practice shunt which involved Patrick Tambay this morning in the final reconnaissance lap for these drivers.
Larry, as you can see, he's very gently being lifted out of the car. He bruised his foot. He has had ankle and leg injuries before, and this was a very unfortunate thing to happen, especially in the morning practice. He does not have time to recover physically, and he will not be starting the Canadian Grand Prix. Patrick Tambay in the Beatrice Ford-powered car out of this race.
Well, it's been a tough weekend for Patrick. As a matter of fact, yesterday in the final qualifying session, the engines are being fired. This is the final lap. They will have one opportunity to take a lap around this course here at Montreal, just south of Montreal on the Ile Notre Dame, before the official start of the race. I was telling you about Patrick. Yesterday, the wing fell off twice, and he had to drive over it. No major damage there, but it's been a long weekend.
It's a beautiful shot of Nigel Mansell. As we said in the opening of the program, Nigel has a great responsibility here. His first pole position of this very early season yet, but Nigel has had trouble in the opening laps of several other Grand Prix, and I think he is absolutely convinced to make that first lap a very clear one once he gets set.
Ideal weather conditions, and off they go now on the final parade lap to form up for the grid, 2.74 miles, and it's going to be a 70-lap race.
There they go. Away. Most of the teams are on fairly soft compound of tyres, which means they're expecting to make at least one pit stop. They hope only to have to make one, but some of them think they may well have to stop twice. Now, away from the start line, they go through a very, very quick S-bend, where they've got to get themselves sorted out pretty quickly after the start to get into the S's, and then along the short straight into a quick right-left, fairly tight. This is really the quicker side of the circuit. As they now go through yet another little S, and then round to the left, and then braking down hard for the hairpin at the far end of the circuit. Now they're just coming into the hairpin area here. Marvellous performance by Nigel Mansell, but to put the car on pole despite a stirring effort in the dying seconds of practice by Ayrton Senna, who just by a few hundredths missed removing that pole position from Mansell. And now they're coming back along the circuit. Again, the character of the circuit is mostly S-bends. It's a beautiful circuit. It's a very, very good track for Grand-Prix racing. It's not too fast, but yet it's got some fairly quick places. It's possible to overtake, but it is hard physically on the drivers. It's hard physically on the cars and the transmissions as well. There's a lot of rushing up and down through the gearbox and slow corners with a lot of wheel spin as they come out. Cars weaving across backwards and forwards, trying to get some heat into those tyres so that they're warmed up nicely for the start of the race. And Mansell very sensibly slowing it right down now as they come into the final S's before the short straight down to the last corner of the hairpin. And slowing it down because, of course, he wants to arrive on his grid position with the field as closely bunched as possible behind him, so that he doesn't, because the starter does not turn on the red light until all the cars are in position on the grid. And Mansell obviously does not want to sit, nor do any of the front men, on the grid for too long with the car in gear, the clutch possibly dragging and getting hotter and risking getting it to slip at the start. And also, of course, the engine temperature goes up and up. And here we've got the onboard car camera shot from the Tyrrell. As they go round the final hairpin and up to the grid.
And not only is Patrick Tambay non-starting because of that broken toe problem of his when he went off in the warm-up this morning, but Jonathan Palmer, who broke a throttle cable in the warm-up and fixed it himself, has got trouble with the car, and so has Christian Danner. But in the front, in pole position on the left, Nigel Mansell. The start is going to be absolutely critical. Ayrton Senna on the right, who is well known now for turning up the boost and going for it hard on the first lap in an endeavour to build up a bit of a cushion. They're okay at the back. It's ready to go. And it's go. And a superb start by Mansell. He really gave it the gun. Mansell leads, Senna second. Piquet has been taken already by Prost from fourth position. So it's the Williams leading, the Lotus second. Alain Prost, the world champion, in third place. Fourth is Nelson Piquet.
Yes, great starts by Mansell and by Prost, and it got pretty fraught in the S's there as they went under the bridge, but the whole field seems to have emerged unscathed.
Lap 1 out of 70. And Nigel Mansell has got about 2 lengths lead. Prost is right up with Ayrton Senna in the black and gold Lotus. Johnny Dumfries, Senna's teammate, incidentally, is starting in the spare car. Nelson Piquet under the wing almost of Prost's McLaren. Behind Piquet is Rosberg. Then the first of the Ligiers, and that's René Arnoux. And Derek Warwick is going well in about 11th position. Lap 1 out of 70.
Well, the two McLarens were quickest in the warm-up this morning, and again look very strong for the race. Prost having a look down the inside of Senna, but meanwhile Mansell is storming away. He's driving a tremendous first lap. He made a very good start because there was nothing much wrong with Senna's either. Senna made a good start, and Mansell still got ahead clear of the first corner. Now look at Prost. He'll be anxious to dispose of Senna as soon as possible, but he'll also be being pretty careful. He probably has pretty bitter memories of the Belgian Grand Prix, previous race, when he got squeezed in the first corner. And Prost having a look, but Senna is not a man who gives room at all. You've got to jolly well take the space from him.
And Nigel Mansell is leading by almost 2 seconds on this, the second lap, and I do believe that Ayrton Senna is holding the rest of the field up. Look at the way they're bunched behind him. Behind him is Prost, then Piquet, then Rosberg, and Berger is well up in the Benetton.
Yes, definitely, Murray. He's because you can see by the way that Prost is climbing all over the back of the car. And this, of course, is great news for Nigel. Look at that lead. It's enormous. A lap and a half completed. And he's really storming away. And that, as I say, to have Senna performing slowing down action for the rest of them behind him is a very, very handy little thing, because fuel consumption here is high, and it's going to be pretty marginal, and that's going to give, as long as Senna stays there in second place, if Nigel can build up a decent lead, then he can cut back on his boost and save fuel, and that may well be vital at the end of the race. Now there's the train that Senna's creating, and there is the 3-second lead already.
Incredible. Nigel Mansell out on his own, Prost going for it at the hairpin. Senna keeps on the racing line, and it's still Piquet third, Rosberg fifth. In 6th position it's Arnoux, 7th is Berger. They come out of the pits hairpin here. Rosberg now right up behind his teammate, and there is Senna. So it's a Williams leading, the Lotus second. Alain Prost doing everything he can to get past Senna, because he will be thinking all the time, this tactical thinking Frenchman, and he will know that Nigel Mansell is pulling away from him, taking advantage of the fact that he's got a clear circuit to build up a lead, so that eventually he will be able to turn back the boost a bit, save his fuel, and in comparative terms coast. So there you can see them. It's Senna, Prost, Rosberg. Don't forget that leading is Nigel Mansell.
Prost's now got a double problem, because he's also got to watch his rear, because Rosberg, if he gets slowed up at all by Senna or gets out of line, Rosberg is definitely going to nip past him, and he'll be looking for any sort of slip.
And once again, Prost goes for it. Once again, Ayrton Senna is able legitimately to move across a bit and prevent Prost from getting through. And once again, Nigel Mansell is able to eke out another 100th or 10th of a second on his lead. This is lap 3 out of 70. Round the hairpin to complete the lap. Now they're building up to the 180 miles an hour section, which leads down to the right-left S-bend, with Keke Rosberg in 4th place, right up with his McLaren teammate Prost, both of them and Senna pulling away a bit from Nelson Piquet, who is in 5th position.
And Prost is going to be, well, he's desperate to get by Senna. He's got to be pretty careful. Senna's reputation for his behaviour under pressure with other cars in close company continues to deteriorate. Ron Dennis, the boss of the McLaren team, told me after the Belgian Grand Prix that although it appeared that Berger, from our camera position, as we could see it, that Berger had squeezed Prost unnecessarily, apparently he was protecting himself from being squeezed by Senna. So as far as the McLaren team were concerned, the cause of that schmozzle in the first corner in Spa was down to Ayrton Senna.
Well, now Nigel Mansell really exploiting this practically unique opportunity which has been handed to him by the yellow-helmeted Ayrton Senna, doggedly sticking to his 2nd place, is 5 seconds ahead. Keke Rosberg shaping up to try and take Prost, as Prost is shaping up to try and take Senna, both of them unsuccessful. Still in 5th position, there he is in the 2nd Williams, Nelson Piquet, number 6. Now, down to the hairpin, and Keke Rosberg locks up his front tyres trying to get through, which gives Piquet the opportunity to close up. Arnoux is still in 6th position in the Ligier, and this is a stirring Canadian Grand Prix, and Prost is through up into 2nd place. And Senna fights back, gets his wheels on the curb, and that's given Keke Rosberg the opportunity to go through as well. Is he going to do it? Yes, he has. So now the McLarens are 2nd and 3rd, and Senna is down to 4th.
Well, they really had to fight to get past. Senna fought and fought, nearly he put a couple of wheels on the curb then, had a bit of a moment himself. And the race now is on for Nigel Mansell. He's got a bit of a cushion, and Senna is dropping back, places hand over fist. Now, he wasn't quick this morning in the warm-up, and obviously in race trim the car is not working as he would like, and so that was a real bonus for Nigel Mansell to be given this comfortable little cushion as a sort of start.
Senna was only 11th fastest in the warm-up, and the order now, as you see, a replay of Senna putting his wheels on the curb, Prost passing him going through up to 2nd place, Rosberg closing up and shortly to take him for 3rd, and now Senna is down in 6th.
Yes, it was well held the way Senna held onto his car, but he really shouldn't have put himself in that situation, because once Prost had got the inside into the first half of that S-bend, he had clearly won the corner, and the only thing Senna could have done from there by continuing to fight was the risk of an accident. So whilst he displayed great car control, it was inexperienced driving as far as I'm concerned, because he shouldn't have been trying to fight a lost cause, because undoubtedly it was a lost cause already, and in fact that probably cost him the place that he then immediately lost to Rosberg, because Rosberg, because of that little moment he had putting the wheels up, he had to lift off the throttle, and that gave Rosberg momentum, the chance to carry him past.
Nigel Mansell really flying. Look at this, 6 seconds lead. The now tremendously experienced Englishman, because this is Nigel's 80th Grand Prix, 4 years with Lotus, when he got so much experience under his belt. Then last year, when he had 2 wins with the Williams team in his first year, pole position here for the 3rd time in his career. He seized his opportunity at the start with an absolutely blinding getaway, built up that lead, and with the rest of them fighting behind him to try and get the 2nd place, he is now over 6 seconds in the lead on this lap 6 out of 70, coming up then to 1/10 of the race distance.
Well, we now have the class of the field, as it were, in the first 4 places, really, because in the warm-up this morning in race trim, the 2 McLarens were quickest, followed by Nigel Mansell, with Nelson Piquet in 5th place. So the first 4 cars are very much the in-form people.
Lap 7 out of 70, 1/10 distance. Nigel Mansell leading by some 6 seconds. In 2nd position, Alain Prost. In 3rd place is Keke Rosberg. 4th is Nelson Piquet. In 5th position, René Arnoux. 6th is Ayrton Senna dropping down the field. 7th is Gerhard Berger. And in 8th place, Riccardo Patrese ahead of Alan Jones, who is 9th, as we look at Ayrton Senna, now passed by René Arnoux. So Senna will just doggedly have to grapple with the Lotus, the race setup of which he is very clearly unhappy about. And René Arnoux, who has fought his way past the Brazilian, and will take a lot of getting past again himself. And Nigel Mansell leads.
Yes, the form of the Lotus seems to have gone a bit awry in the last 2 races, because the chassis seemed to work very well in general terms everywhere until we got to Spa, and then all of a sudden Ayrton was complaining of unsatisfactory handling, and he didn't like the car at Spa, and that was certainly borne out with the struggle he had in the race with it. And once more we've got it here. Now, whether the Lotus have changed anything on the car or whether they've lost their way a bit remains to be seen, but certainly there's a noticeable loss of form in the handling of the chassis department for the Lotus team.
Nigel Mansell's Williams striking sparks, nothing to worry about. We've said many times in the past, but we'll remind you that underneath the car there are titanium skid plates, the object of which is to slide along the ground when the car's on full load if it hits a bump, and it is on full load now, almost. because they obviously start with full fuel tanks, 195 litres of fuel, and there are the two McLarens of Prost and Rosberg. As into the pits comes Alan Jones in the Haas Lola with its Ford engine. Tyre change all round, both the fronts are off. The left rear is off, but the right rear is not. The wheel nut has stuck. They've got the right rear on. And is that Tyler Alexander standing in front of the Lola as Alan Jones dispassionately watches him, and Alain Prost drives on lap 8, second place. Behind him, number 2, his teammate Keke Rosberg. There are no team orders in the McLaren team, and there are 2 world champions in it. The reigning world champion Alain Prost leading of these 2, second. Behind him, there goes Rosberg, who was world champion in 1982. So 2 world champions in the McLaren team, but leading both of them, Britain's Nigel Mansell.
Plenty of world champions around, and Rosberg is getting very close to Prost. He's having a little look, because right behind them, coming into the picture now momentarily, is Nelson Piquet, and there's Alan Jones, having finally got out of the pits, and that is one of the Brabhams. I think that's Patrese.
Yes, Riccardo Patrese is spinning off, and I'm just checking on the lap chart to see where Derek Warwick is. He's in about 10th position now, Derek Warwick, in his first drive for Brabham. Look down the screen and you'll see Nelson Piquet, who is keeping the 2 McLarens very well in sight. Second, third and fourth there, Prost, Rosberg, and there is the leader, Nigel Mansell, on his 9th lap. Look at this. As off spins the Brabham, through goes the Benetton, followed by the 2 Ferraris of Alboreto and Johansson.
And I think I saw on the original shot that Derek Warwick just slipped through past his teammate Patrese when Patrese was pulling away.
Now, I've got the stopwatch running on Nigel Mansell to give you a gap between him and the battle for second place. It's 5.2 seconds now between Nigel Mansell, race leader, and the 2 McLarens that you're looking at now. And you can see how close Nelson Piquet is. The Canadian Grand Prix was a terrific race last year, won by Michele Alboreto, with Stefan Johansson in second position and Alain Prost in third place, and it's shaping up to be just as good this year. We're over 1/10th distance now. We're on lap 10, 1/7th distance now, because it's a 70-lap race, and that is just about 192 miles. And I remind you that this circuit is very hard on tyres. You can see that Piquet there with 127.9 is the fastest man on the circuit, but that is not a lap record. The lap record is held by Senna, 127.45 last year. But Piquet's put on a bit of a burst, closed the gap a bit between himself and Keke Rosberg, who is third. And now on lap 10, it is still Mansell leading, Prost second, Rosberg in third position. In fourth position, it's Nelson Piquet.
Yes, and I have a feeling that Piquet is trying to do what Prost did at Imola, where there was a fuel consumption problem lasting the distance, and I think that Piquet has probably got his boost turned down as low as he can to keep up, and is driving the car very hard through the corners, and is happy to sit where he is at the moment. I think, like the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola, this race will really start after people have all changed their tyres. That's when the guys who've got a bit of fuel left, it really is a matter of nursing things along, and of course it's so difficult to overtake that there's no point in wasting fuel with the boost turned up to try and do it. And I think that Rosberg is making a tactical error in climbing all over the back of Prost and trying to pass him. And also, from his own point of view, physically it's much harder work to drive the car very close to the car in front. First of all, you're driving half blind because your view is blocked. Secondly, the aerodynamics of your car are in the turbulence of the car in front, therefore they don't work as well, therefore the car slides around more and it's more difficult to control. So the workload for the driver himself is getting on for double. when you're driving that close to the car in front. And I think in such a long, hard race that Rosberg should be adopting rather more sensible tactics of giving himself a little bit of breathing space and using this time to save fuel. There is no point in bursting into the lead of this race at this stage.
Now, you haven't seen it because they haven't shown it, but Johansson has moved up into 7th place with his teammate Michele Alboreto behind him, and as Nigel Mansell completes another lap, which is his 11th, and you see the two McLarens in the background, no change there. Nelson Piquet is still in 4th position, Arnoux is still in 5th place, Senna is still 6th, Johansson 7th, Alboreto is 8th, Gerhard Berger is in 9th place, and Jacques Lafitte in the 2nd, Ligier is in 10th position.
Going back to Rosberg, of course, and remember that he did his usual charging sort of tactics, as he appears to be doing at the moment at Imola, and despite the extremely accurate fuel gauge that the McLaren has, he managed to run out 2 laps before the end of the race. He was out of fuel, which really wasn't very clever, and certainly within the McLaren team this year he's won no prizes for intelligent driving. He's been quite heavily criticised and given some stern lectures about using his head in the car, and it does look to me awfully as if his brain has stayed in the pit road once again.
You can see that the first 4 now, with the Minardi there of De Cesaris in the pits, you can see that the first 4 are well ahead of the 5th place man René Arnoux and 6th Ayrton Senna. And you may be wondering whether Nigel Mansell is overstepping things with the lead he's got. Well, you can be sure that, as I said, Nigel Mansell, with all his experience, and he's being talked to by the radio from the pits, they will know what fuel he's supposed to have consumed, and he'll get a readout, so everything should be okay with the race leader.
Yes, there's just one little question. I've been looking for several laps now at the tyres on Mansell's car, and they do look very, very slightly grained, which is a bit of a worry, because the other thing that makes me worry a little bit about the tyre situation is that we've seen 2 people in for tyres already in this race, and we know that tyres are pretty marginal, so we just keep an eye on Mansell's tyres. I don't think there's much wrong with them at the moment because the others aren't really catching him very quickly, so I don't suppose it's too bad, but it's worth watching.
Yeah, round about lap 30 I would expect people to be coming in for tyres, assuming they're only going to have 1 tyre stop, rather less than half race distance, to compensate for the fact that in the second half of the race, or the second these 2/3 by finalising the race, the fuel load will be a lot lighter, and therefore the weight and pressure on the tyres will be a lot less. But that's yet to be seen. There's Alan Jones back in the race in the Haas Lola. Ayrton Senna now scrapping with René Arnoux in the blue Ligier. They're 5th and 6th. This is lap 13. Closing up on Alan Jones, the Australian world champion of 1980. He's got what he describes as his Le Mans engine, Ford engine, in the Lola. That's to say, he reckons it'll last 24 hours, but it needs a bit more power. But Ford are sensibly playing a softly catchy monkey act, as it were, in Grand-Prix racing this year, making sure that the engine is au point before they go for full power. And this is a replay of the Minardi there, and the 2 McLarens chasing it hard. And here coming towards us is De Cesaris back in the pits, and Rosberg up to 2nd place then. Keke Rosberg 2nd on lap 13. He's scrabbled past Alain Prost. Now there's the gap of some 5 seconds between him and the man that we're looking at. There you see Alain Prost in 3rd position for the first time, with Rosberg pulling away, but I suspect Prost knows exactly what he's doing.
Yes, exactly. I don't think Prost is going to be crying about this or losing any sleep about it for the moment. He knows that the second half of the race is what matters, and at Imola, if you remember, he sat back, he sat behind Rosberg, and he took a tow. Don't get so much of a tow here, a tow being the slipstream caused by the car in front. Imola being a much faster circuit, you actually, and there we see a little bit of a drama with Senna getting past René Arnoux there.
Now you can see, without me telling you, that Rosberg is catching Nigel Mansell and Prost is catching Nigel Mansell. The two McLarens are much closer to the Williams now on lap 13 than they were early in the race, when I remind you at one point Nigel Mansell, red 5 on the front of his car, had a commanding lead of over 6 seconds. Well, it's less than 2 seconds now.
Well, this is a very critical stage of the race for Mansell, because he's got to keep nice and cool. He's got Zach Speed in front of him, just holding him up temporarily. He's got to find his way around that. Rosberg is already on his tail. Now Mansell, this is a moment of great pressure when you're being caught, when you're leading a race, and Mansell was still, although he's driving magnificently this season, has really got his act together. He's still showing this tendency to make the odd unforced error. He was very lucky in Belgium because he actually managed to go off the track once during the race and keep everything together and not damage the car and get back, and of course picked up the pieces for a win. But he's got to cut out the mistakes, the little silly mistakes, and this is his chance to prove himself here. He's driving with great confidence. He's improved dramatically his driving really since the Belgian Grand Prix last year when he came second. It seemed to give him a new confidence, and he actually managed to finish a race without, well, again, he was lucky he went off twice, but he did get it there, and he's really shown a vast improvement.
Thanks to Jonathan Palmer holding up Keke Rosberg, Nigel has increased his lead a bit. It's just over 2 seconds now. But Keke Rosberg, who is extremely anxious, like all of them, of course, to win a Grand Prix in his new team, is chasing very hard indeed. Second at Monaco, 4th in Spain, 5th in San Marino, Keke Rosberg, but the world champion of 1982 has yet to score that elusive first victory in his new team. Has come into the pits in the Benetton, and on lap 15, as you look at the battle, it's still Mansell leading by about 2 seconds. There's Rosberg in second place. Prost is still third. Piquet is still in 4th position. 5th is Senna, still in the points. In 6th position, René Arnoux has been displaced by Senna. 7th is Johansson. 8th is Alboreto. 9th is Jacques Lafitte. In 10th position, Gerhard Berger. 11th is Riccardo Patrese. And in 12th position, Derek Warwick in his first drive in the Brabham. Mansell, Rosberg, Palmer, who's about to be lapped by Prost and has now been lapped as they go into the first gear hairpin at some 60 miles an hour. Complete another lap, that's lap 15. And those are the race numbers at the end of 13 laps. 5 leading is Mansell, 2 Rosberg, 1 Prost, 6 Piquet, 25 is René Arnoux, and here they come. Perfect weather conditions. We've had some pretty awful weather at the Canadian Grand Prix in the past, and in practice on Friday, the weather conditions were far from ideal, damp and wet at times. So the race times, with the exception of Johansson for the grid, the starting grid, was set in Saturday's timed practice. And now we look at the 5th place man, Ayrton Senna. There doesn't look to be anything wrong with his car. The tyres are obviously in good shape, but if you're in Senna's position, probably the handling does not seem so good. Well, Mansell is leading Rosberg, or was when they went past our position last time, by 2 seconds. And Prost is Rosberg, and Rosberg is leading Prost by 2 seconds. So there's just about 4 seconds between first and third. 4th position still Piquet. Watching points, they're going through. There's Rosberg. The lead changes, and on lap 17, Keke Rosberg moves into the lead with Nigel Mansell trying to drive round the outside of the hairpin with him. And Keke Rosberg leads the Canadian Grand Prix. And if it's going to be more than interesting now to see what Alain Prost's tactics are, because I'm still convinced that Prost knows what he's doing and he could still win this race.
Yes, Prost's tactics are going to be very simple. He's going to sit behind these two, and here we see again. And I think Rosberg had his boost turned up for that manoeuvre, because he actually passed Mansell on the straight, and when and playing with your boost knob at this stage of the race is probably not a very good idea.
Weekend long, the cars run with a little bit of fuel, trying to get that best qualifying position out of them. And as we said in the pre-race, McLaren concentrates on the race setup, not so much the qualifying setup. And it's certainly paying off here. But in the untimed race practice this morning with full tanks, Keke Rosberg was the fastest out of the entire field, with Alain Prost second and Nigel Mansell third. And as I can see here, Prost is also coming up on Nigel, so that pre-warm-up this morning of 1, 2, and 3 may develop here on the circuit in just a few moments.
John, I started to say a little bit ago that I really like KK this weekend. I've had the feeling all along, even though he didn't qualify on the pole, that he perhaps just a touch more than everybody else maybe was a little bit more hungry. I mentioned those big 5 a couple of times. He's the only one that doesn't have a win, and it sure seems like he is due. And the McLaren car and the Ligier cars, which are not figuring up into the top 3 right now, they're in the number 24 car of Alexander Nannini coming to a stop right here on the front stretch, right in front of the pits. Nannini will move up to the left side, and hopefully they can get that car to crawl down just past the pit area and get it out of the way.
That's a dangerous place for a car to be stopped. It's one of the fastest parts of the circuit. The back end of the car seems to be a little bit more than a turbo fire going on there now. Nannini says, I'm not going to get too close to this. But as you can see, the safety marshals were there very quickly, and the safety vehicle, so we hope that the car won't be damaged too much, especially with Detroit only a week away. The car is burning. They are moving out towards it, of course. Nannini, as you saw, was very quickly out of the car on his own power.
And like so many Formula One drivers as well as IndyCar drivers these days, John, they are very much involved in directing the safety operations. You know, there was a time 3 or 4 years ago when a lot of the teams were complaining about the type of service, emergency service they got, and the drivers now have a habit of really getting involved firsthand.
Well, the reason that is, a race car driver, especially a Formula One driver or any race car driver, has a tendency to be able to think extremely well and quickly and proficiently in an excited, intense situation. Therefore, when you have a marshal who's been sitting along a guardrail for an hour and a half or even 10 minutes, his mind is not wound up as quickly as a race car driver who's been circling this course well over 100 miles an hour average. So when you see a race car driver jump out of his equipment and take control of the situations, because his adrenaline is pumping so fast and he's thinking so quickly and he's so in tune with the situation that he is actually the most efficient person to handle it.
Keke Rosberg, as we're looking at the USF&G Barclays Heralds with Terry Boutsen behind the wheel. Keke Rosberg, who's had a best...
Johnny Dumfries is 14th. Nigel Mansell is in the lead. Jonathan Palmer is well down in the race. So on lap 20, they are doing very well indeed, the British drivers. Now here is Arnoux, and as you can see, he has been caught by the Ferrari of Stefan Johansson, number 28. Johansson, who was second last year behind his teammate Alboreto, fighting his way up through the field. So on lap 20 then, it is Rosberg leading, Mansell second, Prost third, Piquet in fourth position, fifth is Ayrton Senna, sixth is René Arnoux, and there right behind him is Stefan Johansson, seventh position. So Stefan Johansson fighting in the Ferrari, now well ahead of his teammate Michele Alboreto to get into the points. Stefan Johansson, the Swedish driver, he's got 2 points position finishes this year as the first, second and third. Rosberg, Mansell and Prost round the hairpin complete another lap. Johansson's got a third place and a fourth place this year to his credit in Belgium and San Marino, and he's actually doing better than his teammate Michele Alboreto, who's only scored 3 World Championship points. Now Mansell right up with Rosberg. Mansell not giving in. Rosberg was held up, as you saw there, getting past the midfield or tail ender man. And that was Nigel Mansell's opportunity to line his Williams up, dive through the gap. It looks like Thierry Boutsen in the Arrows. And by the way, there is only 1 Arrows in the race, because Christian Danner, who had transferred his allegiance, he thought, from Osella to Arrows, following the fact that Mark Sura is out of Grand-Prix racing for the rest of this year as a result of his rally crash, was not allowed to practice in the Arrows and has had to turn out in the Osella. Senna there, leading those two.
Well, it's not, I have to say, I'm not in possession of the full facts, but it does sound to me, because he's going to be driving, this is Christian Danner, going to be driving the Arrows next week in Detroit, and it sounds to me like bureaucracy gone mad.
Yes, and there was a lot of hard feelings on the part of Enzo Osella, the team owner of the Osella team, who just frankly resented the fact that Danner was leaving him, notwithstanding the fact that Danner was only there on a race-to-race basis. But here we are, back at the front. This is lap 21, and coming towards us and about to take Alan Jones in the Lola. The first three very close to each other. Rosberg, McLaren, Mansell, Williams, and Prost, McLaren.
And I have to say that Mr. Osella had no right to show any feelings of resentment in that situation, as Alan Jones, in trying to make room, makes a bit of a confusion amongst the leaders, and Nigel Mansell is having a go, and I think, courtesy of Alan Jones, and Nigel Mansell retakes the lead. Now, Jones will be a bit aggrieved. He was trying to do the right thing and pull out of the way, and of course in an S-bend it's rather difficult to place the car sensibly, and in fact it made a right mess, and so Nigel Mansell regains the lead. Now, as I was saying about Mr. Osella feeling resentment and getting all uppity about, here we see it again now, and just as they accelerate away, and really Mansell just got onto the throttle first and out-dragged him away. But Osella has no right to feel resentment, and he's really out of order, because if he provided poor Christian Danner with a half-decent car, then that would be one thing. But when he's providing him with a heap of rubbish, like he does, with clapped-out engines that never get rebuilt and produce about half the power of everybody else.
That's Derek Warwick, or his car. Derek Warwick out of the Canadian Grand Prix, his first drive for Brabham. But what a marvellous piece of opportunistic driving by Nigel Mansell that was, in diving through to take the lead from Keke Rosberg. And I've no doubt that he's given it a whiff of extra boost to try and build up a bit of a lead, which he's done now. First, second and third, and it's a long time since we've seen the three leaders as close together in a race as far advanced as this, because we're nearly up to 1/3 distance. We're on lap 23 now, out of 75, and I remind you that we have still got the excitement of the tyre changes to come. That's Nelson Piquet still in fourth position. Mansell leads, Rosberg second, Prost third, Piquet in fourth place. Senna is still motoring on in fifth position. In sixth place, it is still René Arnoux. Right up behind him in seventh place, it is Stefan Johansson. Then some way back, Johansson's Ferrari teammate, Michele Alboreto. Following Alboreto is Gerhard Berger, and then Riccardo Patrese. And that is the man who is in third position, Alain Prost. Looking at, as they went past us last, between race leader Nigel Mansell and his teammate Nelson Piquet. And Nelson too could be coming up with a wet sail later in the race. I don't think from the way he's been going there's anything wrong with the car. I suspect that he, as Prost did at Imola, is just watching his fuel gauge and his turbo pressures and everything else very carefully indeed. They're coming up now. This is the battle between Arnoux and Johansson and Michele Alboreto, 6th, 7th and 8th.
Tremendous race. We've got battles going on all over the place, and obviously a great battle for the lead, with the three of them fighting it out, and Piquet waiting behind to pick up the pieces. Now, Piquet is a driver I'm watching a bit carefully this year, because Piquet doesn't seem to me to be quite the same hard-charging driver this year that he always was, and it seems to be reflected in him himself. He's not quite as bubbly or ebullient as he always used to be, and I don't know what's in him, but it is. Piquet's been at the top for some years now, and it's very hard sustaining that huge level of mental output that is required to do the job, and I just get the feeling that Piquet's a little bit tired. I do hope he proves me wrong, because I think he's one of the truly great drivers, the great drivers of all time, and I really would like to see Piquet back to 100% form. But it strikes me that so far this season he was particularly off form at Monte Carlo. That's where it really came to notice, and he's, as I say, quite the same man.
Marvellous race, lap 24, almost 1/3 distance. There is the race leader, Nigel Mansell. Rosberg is second. Number 1, Prost, is in 3rd position. Nelson Piquet in the 2nd Williams is 4th. Ayrton Senna in the Lotus is still 5th. 6th is René Arnoux, just ahead of 7th place man Stefan Johansson, who is just ahead of 8th place man Michele Alboreto. And the leader, Nigel Mansell, has lapped everybody up to Michele Alboreto. And so then behind Alboreto is Riccardo Patrese. Derek Warwick is out of the race, and behind Patrese is Gerhard Berger. And Nigel Mansell driving a marvellously cool race. You can see how stiffly suspended the cars are as they ripple over the bumps, coming down to the hairpin. And that's Johnny Dumfries in the Lotus, which had to have an engine change after the warm-up this morning, and that was the 4th year in succession the Lotus have had to make an engine change in Canada at the very, very last moment. But there's the Scotsman. Well, I think James is certainly right about Nelson Piquet. He's 16 seconds now behind this battle for the lead. And what a battle it is. Mansell. Rosberg. On the left you see the lake, and on the right is the lake, and on the left is the Olympic rowing strip, because this complex was specially put up on the man-made Ile Notre Dame Island for Expo 67. The buildings, which look quite magnificent on television, are in fact getting a bit tatty and crumbly these days. But never mind, it makes a marvellous backdrop for Grand Prix racing, and what a super race. Lap 25, this is 1/3 distance. Here are the leaders.
Prost seems to have dropped back a little bit. He was shadowing them quite coolly and calmly, the two.
And just try and put yourself in Nigel Mansell's position. Leading a Grand Prix again, he's won 3 already. The magnificent victory in Belgium this year, the European Grand Prix last year, immediately followed by the South African Grand Prix. He's leading again, having lost the lead once in this Canadian Grand Prix. It's going to be fiendishly hot inside that cockpit of his. It's a very hot day in Montreal, and Mansell's cockpit temperatures will probably be up around 150 degrees. He's wearing Nomex underwear, Nomex socks, Nomex gloves, a balaclava helmet, a 3-layer fireproof suit on top of that, and his racing helmet. He's having to work away in that cockpit. 1:27.479 for Keke Rosberg is just outside the lap record. It's about 1/50th of a second outside Ayrton Senna's lap record.
Yes, I should think that's going to take a right hammering, and Mansell just going past Jonathan Palmer there, lapping him again, who moved over nicely and neatly, but Rosberg had to fight his way around, but without any real delay. But I think that record with the heat of this race is going to take a right bashing after their pit stops. With the fuel load down, fresh rubber on, they're going to go a lot faster than this.
Yes, get ready for some real excitement now, as if this wasn't enough, because lap 26 now, and they must soon be coming in for tyres, I would have thought. All the Goodyear runners started this race on C compound tyres, which are pretty soft, and some of them have got a B compound tyre on the right rear to compensate for the extra wear that they're getting there. The Pirelli runners are mostly on soft front tyres and hard rear tyres, so if anybody has made a wrong tyre choice, it could show up fairly soon. Rosberg going for it, showing Nigel Mansell the nose of the McLaren. Alain Prost coasting along in the background, keeping well in touch, but watching his boost pressures. And Palmer is out.
Still very surprised by Rosberg's apparent tactics. This sitting so close to Mansell seems to me to be a complete irrelevancy that can only do him harm, both in terms of exhaustion for himself physically and in terms of use of fuel. Now you see Prost sitting back quite comfortably. There's no real tow here. The track isn't quick enough for there to be an advantage of sitting close to the car in front just so you can run less power for your engine. Therefore, why doesn't he make it easier for himself and just give himself a little bit of air, turn his boost down, and instead of climbing all over the back of Mansell, because this race hasn't started yet. The race starts after the pit stops.
Which may surprise you, but it's perfectly true. And Alain Prost is driving noticeably smoother and more calmly than his teammate Keke Rosberg is. There's Riccardo Patrese in the remaining Brabham, rounding the hairpin, as Keke Rosberg follows Nigel Mansell through to complete lap 28. You saw the gap. It's just about a second. Martin Brundle there in the Tyrrell, who had a pretty unhappy practice. V6 Honda-powered Williams leads the V6 TAG-powered McLaren. 1500cc is all these engines are, smaller than most or many ordinary saloon road cars. The difference being, of course, that they are turbocharged, as a result of which in racing trim they develop some 850 horsepower, and in qualifying trim for the timed sessions on Friday and Saturday, which count for the starting grid, over 1,000 horsepower. And you really do have to be a superman to be able to control that properly. Now, behind this battle for the lead, you're looking at the leader now, number 5, Nigel Mansell, followed by number 2, Keke Rosberg, who is about to lap Martin Brundle, he hopes, and then Alain Prost. There is a titanic battle being waged between the 2 Ferrari teammates, Stefan Johansson, and into the pits goes the McLaren.
Yes, that's Rosberg, first one in. Now let's see how quickly they can get him turned round. McLaren, crew, pretty experienced, they've been pretty good with their pit stops. And that wasn't one of the quickest. It was about 11 seconds. Murray's got had his watch on it, and somebody else I saw just in the background coming in then.
A lot of congestion in the pits there, but it looked to me mostly people who are entitled to be there. But 13 seconds these days is not a pit stop to be particularly proud of. Out of the pits goes Johnny Dumfries in the Lotus, and hopefully he will be able to finish a Grand Prix now. 14 seconds that took for Dumfries, who's failed to finish in Brazil, in Spain, in San Marino and Belgium, and didn't qualify in Monaco. But now, when is Mansell coming in?
Well, if the apparent treatment he gets as late as number 2 is anything to go by, this is his best chance of finishing a race, because he's in Senna's spare car. He's in the spare car as his blew an engine this morning, and they couldn't change it in time. So it's probably been prepared with a lot more loving care and attention than his own. So it is his best chance.
Well, with Rosberg having gone into the pits, there's number 1, Alain Prost, who's moved up to 2nd place, of course. And he's now 3.85 seconds, call it 4 seconds in round figures, behind race leader Nigel Mansell with 30 laps completed. And there's the Williams in the pits. You can see the mechanics all round it. Now, this looks like an excellent pit stop of Nigel Mansell, who this time gets a clear run out of the pits, unlike Belgium. Thumbs up from people all along the pit lane. You can see where the sympathies lie there. And now, Alain Prost will be in the lead of the Canadian Grand Prix, but Nigel Mansell has changed his tyres. Keke Rosberg has changed his tyres. Alain Prost has not, and there's a Ferrari there of Stefan Johansson being craned off. We haven't seen what happened, but obviously Stefan Johansson, who was in 7th place, fighting for that position against René Arnoux ahead of him in 6th place, and Michele Alboreto behind him in 8th place, is out of the Canadian Grand Prix, which is now led on lap 31 by this man, Alain Prost, the coolest, calmest driver not in the race, but there is Alboreto in the pits. So that's the second Ferrari. I wonder if it's just a coincidence that Alboreto comes in immediately after Johansson has gone off. They may have been involved in a touch, but on the other hand, with a 10.5 second pit stop, Michele Alboreto, which isn't bad, but isn't brilliant, he's in good shape now. And up on the leaderboard. Lap 32.
And there's Prost in, and you can see his tyres beginning to look a bit tired then, so not before time. Now, Prost... They've got a bit of a problem with one wheel. They've got a problem. The trouble is we can't see what's going on. There's so many people down the pit road, and this is a terrible shame for Prost. It's a disastrous pit stop. He has lost a good 10 seconds over his two rivals who are out on the track on that, so we may be about to see a stirring drive from Alain Prost. Now we've got the two Williamses together, and what's more, we've got Rosberg just behind. So Mansell is now leading the race again, and Rosberg is pretty close behind him in second place.
Not going to be able to go the whole race distance on one set of tires.
With all the other leaders on fresh rubber, as we mentioned, it's going to make them significantly faster. You don't have any choice, particularly with 50-plus laps to go. You got to come in, too. I think we may be in store for some thrills, though. Alain Prost, when he turns it loose, he is as good a race driver as anybody. I know that a lot of people, including my esteemed colleague, Jackie Stewart, thinks that Nelson Piquet is the best race driver in the world. I lean kind of toward Prost. I've never seen anybody with the ability to go as fast as he can, so smoothly and so consistently, year after year, not just race after race.
Well, it's a very good analogy of Alain Prost and his style of driving. Sometimes he looks absolutely slow through the corners. He's so incredibly fast, and that same lap can be a new track record.
There go the leaders. Right there is Nigel Mansell. Now, the first pit stops, we believe to be the only pit stops, have taken place, and the strategy begins to unfold at the Canadian Grand Prix.
Mansell ganha terreno nitidamente Nelson Piquet. Tem aqui a classificação: Mansell, Piquet, Rosberg, Senna, Prost e Arnoux. Os homens que estão nos pontos, e Senna e Piquet não trocaram pneu. É curioso que Rosberg não está a ganhar tanto tempo a Nelson Piquet como se poderia esperar. Ele que tem pneus frescos.
For so many years, the current world champion seems to have been consistently dogged by bad luck. Nobody has won it 2 years running since 1959-60, and Prost really seems to be in a bad luck streak at the moment. Belgium was not his fault at all. He drove a magnificent race afterwards and certainly would have won the race quite easy had he got round the first corner safely. And this certainly was very un-McLaren-like, and of course it can happen to anybody at any time, but this is a very critical stage of the season when it suddenly happened to Prost.
Yes, and with Ayrton Senna in fourth position, I would love to know what the dialogue between Patrick Head, the Williams team chief here in Canada, and Nelson Piquet over the pits to car radio is, because Piquet, who I say again has yet to change tyres and is in second place, has got Mansell in front of him, and just behind him Keke Rosberg, and there is the Lotus of Ayrton Senna in the pits. Now watch that. Now this looks like an excellent, it is, it's the best stop we've had so far. 9.4 seconds for a complete tyre and wheel change on Ayrton Senna's Lotus, which was in fourth position and still is. And now on lap 34, coming up to half distance shortly, in the lead, there he is, Nigel Mansell. In second place, his teammate Nelson Piquet. In third place, Keke Rosberg. In fourth position now is Alain Prost, because Senna has lost time going into the pits and has gone down to fifth. In sixth position, it is René Arnoux, and in seventh position, Michele Alboreto in the lone Ferrari. Out of the race has gone Stefan Johansson. Out of the race has gone Jonathan Palmer. Out of the race has gone Johnny Dumfries, who collided with Stefan Johansson. Alessandro Nannini was out a long time ago, and there was Nelson Piquet lapping the second Osella of Pier Carlo Ginzani, the Italian, and he's right up with his behind Martin Brundle now. No, it's Philippe Streff, apologies. Philippe Streff in the Tyrrell, the tall Frenchman. Now these three coming towards us were Riccardo Patrese, Nigel Mansell going through on the inside of Martin Brundle. And Nigel has got an absolutely superb race rhythm now. He's leading Nelson Piquet by just under 4 seconds. He's really, almost literally, in the groove. He hasn't put a wheel wrong in the race, came in and made an excellent pit stop, led the race for the first 19 laps, lost the lead momentarily, regained it, and Britain's leading Grand Prix driver is very much on his winning way. Coming up to the low-line Brabham of Riccardo Patrese. Derek Warwick out of the race. Piquet second, there he is. Rosberg third, there he is, followed by Philippe Streff, who is well down the field.
Well, the thing that has surprised me since the two of the leaders made their pit stop, Piquet has yet to, is the fact that Rosberg is on fresh tyres and doesn't seem to be able to even catch, let alone pass, Nelson Piquet. Meanwhile, Mansell, as you'd expect, is storming away on his fresh rubber. And that is Philippe Streff, I think. It's Martin Brundle, beg your pardon, and there is Piquet in the pit. So now, what worries me about Rosberg, though, and that was another fine pit stop by the Williams team. The Williams team certainly seem to be the class of the field, their crew, when it comes to changing tyres at the moment. They were absolutely electrifyingly fast in Spain, which very nearly provided Nigel Mansell with a win in that photo finish when he lost by inches to Ayrton Senna. They were very, very quick again at Spa, and so they're red hot and full marks to them. They worked very hard at getting that. But Rosberg, I think it may just be that he has gone over the top in the first half of the race, the pre-pit stop period, and used too much of his fuel, and he may just have to be right back and have to, as it were, abdicated from the chase of Mansell.
Well, now on lap 36, Rosberg has done the trick. He has got ahead of Nelson Piquet. Of course, don't forget Nelson Piquet now has got his tyres, so it's Mansell leading, it's Rosberg second, it's Piquet third, and Prost fourth. In 5th position, René Arnoux. In 6th position is Ayrton Senna. So 5 of the gang of 5, the top Grand Prix drivers of the year, are in the top 6 places, and the 6th one is René Arnoux, who is in 5th position. So behind Senna, in 7th place now, is Jacques Lafitte. Both the Ligiers, as is their wont this year, doing very well. And in 8th place is Michele Alboreto. And Mansell is 10 seconds now, a super cushion ahead of Rosberg.
Yes, and he's pulling away from both the McLarens. So it looks as if Nigel Mansell is doing to Alan Prost what Alan Prost did to everybody else at Imola in the San Marino Grand Prix, because this is really a remarkable performance. Mansell is driving an absolutely superb race. As Murray said, he's made no errors at all. He's kept it absolutely clean. And he's now storming away, and I must think that he's got some extra fuel in hand.
Yes, Nigel Mansell, who started his Grand Prix career as a protege of the late and great Colin Chapman with the Lotus team, and spent 4 years with them. And it was no secret, there's Rosberg in 2nd place. It's no secret that certainly in his last season with Lotus, Nigel Mansell was most unhappy. He felt he wasn't getting equal treatment with Elio De Angelis at that time, and as a result of that he left Williams. He's settled in at Williams last year like a duck takes to water, and he's really developed his enormous talent very much this year. So now Keke Rosberg charging hard. You can see the heat haze as he goes over the bumpy exit from the pits hairpin, and he's doing about getting on for 180 miles an hour on this section. Doesn't look it, but believe me, it is. Down to the left, right, the S, sliding it hard. Rosberg's had a lot of trouble adjusting his style from the Williams that he was in last year and the previous 3 seasons, where he had very much a loving of oversteer, hanging the tail out, to the much smoother, more deliberate style which Niki Lauda and Alain Prost developed with the McLaren. And the result of that is that Prost's car and Rosberg's car have to be set up entirely differently. The differential is much closer now than it was at the beginning of the season, because Rosberg has deliberately tried to adjust his style, but he's still having problems compared with the man that you're looking at, the reigning world champion Alain Prost, who is now in 3rd position ahead of Nelson Piquet. So the 2 Williams, 1st and 4th, Mansell and Piquet, are sandwiching the 2 McLarens, 2nd and 3rd, Rosberg and Prost, and the leaders are now on their 39th lap out of 75. So it's just about half distance, isn't it? Doing a bit of quick mental arithmetic while I talk to you there. So in 5th position, René Arnoux. Down to 6th place has gone Ayrton Senna. All is obviously not well with the Brazilian's Lotus. And Mansell is methodically easing out and increasing his lead over Keke Rosberg in the McLaren, and it is now 12 seconds. Half distance, James, 12 seconds lead, tactics.
Well, it certainly looks as if Mansell's played it just right, because he's some 24 or so seconds ahead of Alain Prost, and he stormed away immediately after the pit stop. I would imagine, really, only he knows just how much fuel he's used. It may be that he turned up the boost a little bit to give it a bit of a sprint and try to demoralize the pursuing McLarens. It may be that with his new tyres he just had that much in hand. If he has used it as a tactic and turned up the boost a bit, then of course things can all change towards the end of the race. And that is the one problem that we have now with reading a race such as this, because what we can't know is what a driver's fuel gauge is telling him and where he's got his boost knob set. We can't.
Well, we had refueling a couple years ago, and it was so dangerous in the pit area. They are not really built for refueling.
McLarens have always been very strong in the latter part of the race, and I know that Prost doesn't fiddle with his knob during the race, which is probably pretty sensible, and therefore, as a general rule anyway, and therefore he will be running on a consistent power output throughout. He does turn it down a little bit, of course, if he can. If he's got no future in that he can't pass the people in front. But so I'm quite flummoxed at the moment. But the only thing we do know is that Mansell is charging on tremendously.
Getting fiendishly close at the top of the World Championship now. One can start to speculate with over the half the race completed. But if Nigel Mansell won this race, he'd get 9 points to add to the 18 he already has, which would give him 27. Ayrton Senna is only in 6th position at the moment, which is 1 point, so he would be behind Nigel Mansell because he has 25 points at the moment. And into the pits comes Jacques Lafitte in the 2nd Ligier to take on some new Pirelli tyres. All the others except Lafitte's teammate René Arnoux are on Goodyears, of course. The tube sticking out of the front of his helmet is to enable him to have a drink during the race. It goes down to a drink bottle, and it required a lot of tuning to get it right, because in the past, drivers who've tried this were getting a totally unexpected and an unwanted drink on acceleration sometimes.
Yes, I can speak from experience that I had that happened to me. We were experimenting with drink bottles. They are very difficult to tune because of the huge G-forces in the car. And first time we had one was in practice.
That's Thierry Boutsen in the lone arrows out.
in practice at the Nürburgring on the old circuit, and there's a 3-mile straight there, at the end of which there's a wiggle, wiggle, wiggle very quickly, and when you're full on the brakes, followed by a second gear, very slow corner. And you're very busy in the braking area, and it was when I put the brakes on that this problem occurred, 3 miles straight, and all of a sudden I got half a pint of orange juice in my face as I was trying to slow from 190 miles an hour down to about 80 through a wiggly bit of S's. It was a pretty exciting moment, really.
These things are sent to try us, and they do, but now you see the battle between René Arnoux for 5th place and in 6th position, Ayrton Senna. So in 5th position, René Arnoux in the Ligier, keeping up the terrific form that he's shown already this year, because he was 4th in Brazil, 5th in Monaco, and Nigel Mansell now on his 42nd lap, leading the Canadian Grand Prix in magnificent style. The man from Port Erin, Nigel Mansell, appropriately enough, now comes from the Isle of Man, and has a lovely home there where he lives with his wife Roseanne and his son and his daughter. So you can see now the battle with the Ligier, with Senna going for it, battling hard. Lotus with the Renault V6 engine versus Ligier with the V6 engine. They've both got the new pneumatic valve engined Renault power plant. That's a V6, and it develops in race form some 850 horsepower. And now on lap 43 in this 75 lap race, so there's 22 laps to go, Nigel Mansell leading by 13.5 seconds. He will know it. I say again, it's not just a question of having visual signals as they pass the pits these days. It is the fact that the pits to car and car to pits radio systems are ever more sophisticated. René Arnoux still holding that 5th position, as a result of which the pits can not exactly have a conversation, but they can certainly tell the drivers exactly what the score is. And the most important thing to communicate these days is what the fuel reading in front of the driver should be, and if he gets the wrong figure, he'll have to slow up a bit until he's getting the right balance. And so Nigel Mansell, I'm sure, will be conserving fuel, and on lap 44 it is still Mansell leading, and in 2nd place behind him Keke Rosberg, in 3rd position in the 2nd McLaren Alain Prost, 4th is Nelson Piquet, Williams cars 1st and 4th, McLaren cars 2nd and 3rd. In 5th position and 6th position, what you are looking at now, Frenchman René Arnoux, Brazilian Ayrton Senna. Michel Teytu, the Frenchman who was with Renault, designed the Ligier chassis, which René Arnoux is sitting in at the moment. Like all of them these days, it's carbon fibre and enormously strong, will stand the most enormous shunts and still allow the driver to get away with it. The drivers, of course, very, very firmly belted into their seats. You can see the red strap over René Arnoux' right and left shoulders. He's got one over each thigh, one round the waist, all of them coming to a common buckle, which has got a very quick release on it. And the drivers these days have epaulettes on their overalls, so that should they be in the unfortunate position of being unconscious in the car or unable to get out of it, they can be pulled out by marshals. And Senna seemed to me to be dropping back a bit there. That is De Cesaris in the 2nd of the Minardis, with his teammate Nannini already out of the race. So De Cesaris out, Boutsen out, Gerhard Berger has slowed up a lot in the Benetton. Johansson is out as a result of a collision coming out of the pits with Johnny Dumfries, who is also out. Jonathan Palmer is out, Nannini is out, and the race order on lap 44 is, you see there, 5 Mansell, 2 Rosberg, 1 Prost, and the rest.
Position, he too is on the lead lap. Everybody else is at least 1 lap down. This is the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix. We are on an island, the Île Notre Dame, just south of the city of Montreal, which itself is on an island. It's really a beautiful setting. This park that we are in, actually, was the park that was constructed for Expo 67. Part of this facility was also used for the 1980 Olympics, and it really is a very nice venue for any type of automobile race, and it is a real bona fide entry into Formula One racing, John.
We were watching the Williams car circle around behind the Ferrari of Michele Alboreto. Larry, of very good news also. Some of our listeners from previous broadcasts may be aware of the fact that Frank Williams, the owner, director, and founder of Williams Racing, had a terrifying and a very serious injury resulting from a road car accident after following his team down to Circuit Paul Ricard for some testing. We were all very worried about Frank's condition as it became life-threatening at many points throughout a 3-week period. Frank has movement of his head. He has a very severe spinal injury. His upper arms are beginning to come back to life and have feeling in them. He is in constant communication with his team, and walking down the pits today, listening to Nigel Mansell talking to his team manager, there were several very technical points that were being given to him as input directly from Frank Williams. And we have Stefan Johansson has come into our commentary booth here. He has...
And so here is race leader Nigel Mansell. Now he has lapped Michele Alboreto in the Ferrari. You can see the scarlet car behind. And although the Ferrari is going better since Belgium and at Belgium than it did earlier on in the season, it is frankly a pale shadow of the great racing name that we have known in the past, with so many magnificent World Championship victories to its credit. They seem to have got the power of the Ferrari right. There's Alboreto in the background, and that's Mansell leading through the S's there. But the handling of the Ferrari is just not what it should be. They've redesigned the rear suspension, but it's still not up to snuff, and it's still not putting the power down properly through the rear wheels.
Yes, unfortunately, the problem is, and I speak with restraint because he's a good friend of mine, but it's Harvey Postlethwaite, who Ferrari, when they came to Britain looking for a designer, they were, in effect, doing the right thing. They were buying technology, basically, that they hadn't got in terms of engineering and needed that sort of knowledge, but they still don't seem to realise that they picked the wrong guy, because although Harvey Postlethwaite has always designed beautifully engineered and very good racing cars, he's actually never designed a fast one. And I speak from experience, because 2 of his creations I've had to suffer from driving them because they were rather slow.
Well, here's a couple of cars that are by no means slow, and you can see that Nelson Piquet in car number 6, the second of them, the Williams, is closing on the McLaren in front of Alain Prost. So it's still Mansell, Rosberg, Prost, Piquet, and you're looking at the battle for 3rd position between the world champion of 1985 and the world champion of 1981 and 83. There he is, number 6, Nelson Piquet. Nelson Piquet, like Prost, like Rosberg, that's Ghinzani out. So once again, with Ghinzani having run out of fuel, both Acellas are in trouble. Well, one of them's right out of the race altogether, and Christian Danner, of course, is a pretty disgruntled driver of the second one. And what a great scrap now. Mansell leads Rosberg by 12.5 seconds. Prost 3rd, just ahead of Piquet, and you're looking at that now. The Frenchman René Arnoux in 5th position. Ayrton Senna, the World Championship leader, is in 6th place, still on his way to a single World Championship point for that 6th position, but that will put him down to 3rd position in the World Championship if Prost and Mansell finish in their current positions. And that's Riccardo Patrese with a turbo gone on the Brabham coming into the pits. And you can see what I was saying now. As soon as the car slows down, and therefore the turbo slows down, the oil ignites, and what happens is that when they come into the pits, the first thing that the mechanics do on many of the cars is to stuff an enormous stick with an asbestos rag on it up the exhaust pipe to stop the oxygen getting in to ignite. I don't think they're going to have that problem. So So, Nigel Mansell leading Rosberg by 11 seconds, which means to say that Rosberg has closed up a bit, but I'm pretty sure that that will be because Mansell has slowed down, driving a tactical race in what is getting towards the closing stages of the race. And Piquet goes for it and does it. And so now, with Piquet up into third position, we face the prospect of a first and second for Williams, because Piquet is motoring very hard indeed and starting to close on second place man Rosberg.
Yes, if he can keep this pace up, he's certainly on schedule to catch him, and it seems that Piquet has at last come alive a little bit. It also seems that to me that the Williams team have done their sums very well so far as fuel consumption is concerned, and particularly here we have a replay of Piquet going by, and that looked to me very much, you see, as if Piquet had been able to afford the luxury of turning up his boost a little bit to sweep past Prost like that, because he outpowered him down that short straight to get into position. And Mansell, I think, is probably taking it fairly easily now, and you see there we have a new lap record. Nelson Piquet 26.4, and that's a full second under the old lap record. So Piquet is the man charging at the moment. That's Mansell, of course, but he's got a pretty safe cushion to come under any threat from his teammate Piquet, who of course his main object at the moment is to dispose of Keke Rosberg, catch and then pass him.
Of the many interesting points this season, one of them to me is the, I won't say emerging dominance of Mansell over Piquet, because that would definitely be an overstatement, but Nigel Mansell has certainly done better in relation to Piquet this season than a lot of people expected him to. Piquet came to the Williams team after 7 years with Brabham, with one of the most shining reputations, and very well deserved it was too, in Grand Prix racing. And Nigel Mansell having won 2 Grand Prix at that time, compared with Nelson Piquet's 12 Grand Prix victories at that time. But now Nigel Mansell currently has more points in the championship than Piquet, as a result of having got more places in the first 6, and he's leading his teammate pretty convincingly in this Canadian Grand Prix, the 6th race in the 16-round World Championship Series.
Yes, I have to confess that I was one of those many people that you just mentioned who was surprised by the relative form of Mansell and Piquet, and very pleasantly surprised, I might add. What is somewhat against the sort of general run of players, the fact that Piquet, although he's had 2 bad seasons at Brabham to finish up with, which of course is a bit soul-destroying, or can be, it tends to put you down, the perfect mental tonic for that traditionally has always been to change teams and get back on your best behavior and full output again, and it just tends to spark up that mental approach a little bit, a move of teams. If anything, it seems to have had the reverse effect on Nelson Piquet. He seems to me to be a slightly depressed person compared with the person he was, and you see that more from talking to the guy and meeting him around, and fun enough, than you can see from observing a car from the outside when he's driving.
And it's had just a reverse effect on Nigel Mansell, of course, who's tremendously stimulated by the appearance of the man you're looking at in his team, Nelson Piquet. I was on a forum with Nigel recently, and he totally dominated the evening with witticisms and authority, just as he's dominating this race at the wheel of the Williams. Lap 51, 70-lap race. Mansell leads, Rosberg second, the man you're looking at now, number 6, double world champion Nelson Piquet third. There is Prost, reigning world champion, in 4th position. It is still René Arnoux 5th in the Ligier, another good finish for the French team. It is still Ayrton Senna in 6th position, and everybody has been lapped up to Ayrton Senna by Nigel Mansell, the race leader. And you can see Michele Alboreto in the background behind Keke Rosberg, who has lapped the Italian in the Ferrari. And behind Alboreto is Alan Jones, going strong in the Haas Lola. looking for rather more than Le Mans horsepower, I think, to demonstrate that he's lost none of his ability, and I don't think he has.
Well, although they're slightly separated, they are all racing very hard up front. Rosberg is still 6 seconds in front of Piquet, so he's making it pretty hard for Piquet to close. And in the meantime, I think that Mansell has speeded up a little bit up front just to give himself some space, possibly because he's had the information that Piquet's making a charge to the field, so he wants to get away a little bit and make it as tough as possible. But despite, as I say, the fact that they're a little bit spread out, they are all 4 of that leading bunch really going for it, still with quite a lot that can happen between now and the end of the race, bearing in mind that we do have a fuel consumption problem and we could get some coughing, spluttering and then dead engines before the race completes its full distance.
And still the thick-shouldered, massive-muscled René Arnoux, who looks like an all-in wrestler when he's walking around with his overalls down to the waist, is leading Ayrton Senna. And Ayrton Senna, who went to Maranello last week to see the great commendatore Enzo Ferrari, and as a result of that, a statement was issued by Ferrari that there was absolutely no question of Senna joining them this year, as a result of which everybody who's in the know is firmly convinced that Senna will be with Ferrari next year. And up front, while we look at the battle between Arnoux, Senna and Jacques Laffite in the second Ligier, there's a battle developing between Nelson Piquet and Keke Rosberg. Incidentally, Jacques Laffite is a lap behind Ayrton Senna, so don't get too excited, but it's a jolly good race on the circuit. 5th in the white helmet and the blue and white Ligier, René Arnoux. Then behind him, Ayrton Senna is 6th. But now Nelson Piquet is definitely closing on Keke Rosberg, and hopefully we'll be able to see that soon. And I'm frantically racking my brains to try and think when the last time that Williams had a 1st and 2nd in a championship Grand Prix was. Arnoux. Not a very good tester, René Arnoux, and said by the people who have been in teams with him not to be the best of teammates either, but he's a thumping good driver and jolly difficult to get past. Now there is Rosberg, there is Piquet, this is the battle for 2nd place, and Piquet is going for it, and if he passes the red and white McLaren that he's closing up on now, that's the thin Keke Rosberg who lives in Ibiza, he will, Piquet, have made it a 1st and a 2nd for Williams. He's currently on lap 53. Senna is trying to get past well, Laffite has got past Senna. That's interesting, and that is an indication of the fact that things must be awry with Ayrton Senna. No reflection on Jacques Laffite, but Jacques, who is the oldest driver in the race, 42 years old, and currently on his 173rd Grand Prix. There he is on a replay, passing Ayrton Senna into the 1st gear 60-mile-an-hour hairpin. So Senna is desperately fighting now for 6th position on lap 54. That's Rosberg. Now look and see where Piquet is. There he is. Ahead of them by some 15 seconds now, Nigel Mansell. Nigel really has now just got, as I've said before, to watch everything. He's got to watch his boost pressures, his fuel consumption, his tyres, his lines, his gear changing, his braking. But provided he does that with a lead of over 20 seconds now, he is well on target for his 2nd win of 1986 and the 4th win of his career, and World Championship leadership. Piquet right up with Rosberg 2nd.
And Prost in the background there he is, just behind them, so we now have a 3-way fight, or are about to have a 3-way fight for 2nd place. Prost has followed Piquet along, but certainly the Williams cars do seem to be the car of the day in charge. They seem to have something in hand over the McLarens, and it's been a long time since, in race trim with everything else equal, that the McLarens have been, or people have shown real superiority over them, as Piquet punches his way past Rosberg. He dipped out very nicely. That was a good manoeuvre because he pretended he wasn't going to do it. He sold him a bit of a dummy and then just ducked out, allowed Rosberg to relax a little bit. Rosberg didn't really make any attempt to defend his rear, and Rosberg is now about to come under pressure from his teammate Alain Prost, and here we see the end of the manoeuvre, but it was all done at the beginning when Nelson played the famous old dummy trick and things, and now Prost has caught him up. So Rosberg's world coming to a bit of a shattering business around him, as his nice second place has already been demoted to third and looks under some threat from Alain Prost, but I'm quite certain he'll defend that third place vigorously against... Oh, and maybe he's in trouble because he waved Prost through. So there may be some problem with Rosberg. I suspect if there is a problem, it's that he's having to slow right down to save fuel. He's probably gone over the top on fuel, and if he has, I should think he'll get a pretty frosty reception from his McLaren team when he gets back, because he made a mess of his fuel situation in the Spanish Grand Prix. He did it again at Imola, and really the McLaren team are threatening to send him off for an intelligence test and a bit of IQ training.
But what great news for Frank Williams. I had the honour of having a long conversation with the lion-hearted Frank Williams yesterday, and I'm sure that the knowledge that his cars are first and second is going to be the most enormous fillip for him.
And Piquet could be in trouble. I think he's blistered his left rear tyre. There looks like a big blister line right across the middle of the tread. There it is. And Nelson Piquet, if he's blistered that left rear, it's going to be a big struggle for him. So this race is by no means over. What looked like a nice, comfy 1-2 for Williams just a moment ago as Nelson got past Keke Rosberg. If that tyre is certainly not going to be working 100%, it's not going to be at maximum efficiency now. It's damaged, and fun enough, the right rear looks as if it's developing a little bit of a blister as well, as that, of course, as the tyre literally bubbles up and blisters when they get too hot, and they then, of course, the performance is destroyed. There's no danger that the tyre's going to fly apart or anything like that. It just means that the performance is reduced, and so the two McLarens are suddenly very much back alive, fighting for the second place that I'm sure they thought they wouldn't see again.
And as you look at the battle for 5th and 6th between Arnoux in the Ligier and Senna in the Lotus on lap 56 out of 70, it is still Nigel Mansell with a commanding 22nd lead in the Williams, ahead of his teammate Nelson Piquet with those blistered rear tyres, who is second. In third position, Alain Prost. In fourth position, Keke Rosberg. Fifth and sixth, René Arnoux and Ayrton Senna. There they are. Only those first 6 are on the same lap. Piquet. Now watch that left rear tyre. It's the right one actually as you look at it, but the left that Nelson is driving on, and you see that dark circle all the way round. There's a blister there. Nelson will probably feel it through the handling of the car. Keke Rosberg will certainly be able to see it.
Yeah, and Prost now just moving into position to challenge. Rosberg has dropped right back, presumably saving fuel. I had to say that I think that if he does run out of fuel in this race, I don't think he'll go back to the pit. I think he'll keep walking straight to the airport. I don't think he'd dare go back to the pit after Imola. But Prost can undoubtedly see the trouble that Nelson is in, and so for that stirring bit of charging driving from Nelson, that seems to be the price. And but of course Prost has still got to find a way around him, and that's not going to be easy, especially if Nelson has got plenty of fuel left and therefore can run a reasonable amount of power on his engine.
Yes, Prost who can see the blisters on Piquet's tyre, not Rosberg. Rosberg's got good eyesight, but not that good. He's in 4th position. Now, in 7th position, and lapped, of course, is Michele Alboreto. In 8th position is Jacques Lafitte, and in 9th position, Martin Brundle in the Tyrrell. So British drivers leading. Nigel Mansell, there he is in the Williams, and in 9th position, Martin Brundle in the Tyrrell, who, like everybody, has already started negotiating with teams for who he's going to drive for in 1986. I'm sure he'll be welcome in the Tyrrell team again, but we'll have to wait and see. And a puff of smoke from the rear of Nigel Mansell's Williams as he changes down on the approach to the corner there. Coming up to lap Jonathan Palmer again in the Zach Speed, the European Formula 2 champion of... That's Jonathan Palmer, who is in the Zach Speed, ex-British Formula 3 champion, ex-European Formula 2 champion, drove for the Ram John McDonnell team, gives a signal to Nigel Mansell, pass on the right, Nigel. Nigel needs no second invitation and absolutely rockets past the Zach Speed. Now, you can see that blister looks to me to be getting bigger all the time, as it obviously will be when you think... And into the pits goes Rosberg. Keke Rosberg has gone into the pits in the McLaren. Let us see him, please. So it's Mansell leading, Piquet second, Prost third, and the 4th place man Rosberg into the pits, which will give Arnoux a chance to move up.
Yes, and it strikes me, this business, I suspect that Rosberg went in for tyres, and it looks to me as if Piquet's going to have to go back in for tyres, because I can't see him going the rest of the race on that tyre, or not competitively, as competitive as he's managing at the moment. And so the idea from the teams before the races that we intend to, the general attitude was we intend to make only 1 pit stop, but we feel we might have to make 2, and it's beginning to look as if people are going to have to make 2.
Well, here's Piquet. There is Prost. And Prost, who is the most amazingly cool, calculating driver, can see those blisters, or that enormous blister on Piquet's tyre. But as James has said, the way Piquet is driving, and with his skill and experience, it is, as ever, one thing to close up and another to pass. But Prost is going to do it, and he's done it. So now Prost is up into 2nd place. Rosberg has gone into the pits, Piquet into the pits. He has decided to take on new rear tyres. The pits will know, because he will have told them by the radio. And another cracking Williams stop. I think that's the fastest ever, although it's for 2 tyres only and not 4, but 7.8 seconds. So Alain Prost now in 2nd position. The closing stages of the Canadian Grand Prix are turning out to be absolutely sensational. Lap 62 out of 70. And Nigel Mansell, who regained the lead some time ago, is still out in front. But in a situation where Nelson Piquet had got up into 2nd place, ahead of the 2 McLarens of Rosberg and Prost, we've had Nelson Piquet charge into the pits to take on new rear tyres in, I reckon, a new record pit time of 7.7 seconds. and so for that matter has Keke Rosberg. And now on lap 62 you're looking at the race leader Nigel Mansell. In second position it's the reigning world champion Alain Prost, who was third last year. In third position it is that man, number 2, Keke Rosberg. In fourth position, just behind him, there is Nelson Piquet. In fifth position, it is Ayrton Senna, who after a race-long battle has got ahead of René Arnoux, who is now sixth. Only those 6 are on the same lap. Michele Alboreto is in seventh position, Jacques Lafitte is eighth, and Brundle is ninth.
Yes, and despite the fact that that pit stop for Piquet, who you see here now, he and Rosberg were in pretty close to go on the circuit before. They both stopped at very much the same time just a couple of laps ago, and Piquet is getting through. Piquet is through. He's just powered his way past Rosberg, who we think is probably cut well back on his boost to conserve fuel. He drove a pretty hard first half of the race, but the wisdom of changing just 2 tyres, well, we'll see how well it works, because it may just be the rears are too good at the moment for the fronts. You could have a handling problem, and I would have thought for the extra, say, second and a half or something that you might have to take to change all 4, it would probably be a safer bet. However, having said all that, Piquet appears to be really motoring, so he doesn't seem to be suffering a serious handling problem, and there we see again that overtaking manoeuvre, and it really was on pure power. So he's running a lot more power, a lot more boost than Rosberg. He's definitely got more fuel to play with.
Yes, but hats off to Nigel Mansell, who has driven an absolutely superlative race. He's not put a wheel wrong the whole time. He came in coolly to take on tyres at just the right time. He regained the lead, and frankly, he has been the man of the race without a shadow of doubt. But I've been trying to work out while I was talking the last time, and you're looking at the race leader now, Nigel Mansell, going strongly in his 80th Grand Prix, on his way to his 4th Grand Prix win if he stays where he is now, in which case he will add 9 points to the 18 that he already has as a result of his win in Belgium, his second place, his magnificent second place in Spain, his 4th position in Monaco, and that will take him to at least joint leadership and almost certainly leadership in the World Championship for the first time in his career. If I sound a bit vague, it's because a lot depends on what happens behind him. Currently, of course, it is world champion Alain Prost in second place in the McLaren, the man who is in second place in the World Championship at the moment. Now in third position, it's the second Williams of Nelson Piquet, the world champion of 1981 and 83. But Mansell there, as he comes down to the hairpin, first gear, 60 miles an hour, to complete another lap, is in a very, very strong position indeed. 63 laps completed by Nigel Mansell. 62, my apologies. So it's 8 laps to go, including the one that he's on. 8 laps of 2.74 miles, 4.41 kilometres each. The lap record at the present moment held, and it's a new lap record from last year, of course, and that is Ayrton Senna, who is in 5th place, followed by René Arnoux, who is 6th in the Ligier. The lap record, Nelson Piquet, 1 minute 26.4 seconds, and that's a speed of about 114 miles an hour. Senna has had a pretty unsatisfactory race by his very high standards. He started from 2nd on the grid, 4th time in the front row in the 6 races that have been held this year. But the handling of the Lotus seems to have gone awry in the last few races. They have been experimenting with new rear suspension uprights, but things do not seem to be quite right. I'm assuming that that's the problem. But anyway, Senna is in only 5th place. I say only because that's not something that will please him too much. And Nigel Mansell is leading now on lap 64 by some 23 seconds.
Yes, Mansell looks to have it very comfortably sewn up. He's driven absolutely magnificently here. He's dominated really the whole meeting, apart from an attack on his pole position that he'd already got in the dying minutes of qualifying. Then Senna very nearly nicked it from him. He's been absolutely on top and all through the race. He's driven magnificently. The pit stop was the turning point. He got in there, he'd saved fuel, he'd driven a sensible first half, but he'd had Rosberg in close company with him, and then he just took off, and he built up a 10-second lead over Rosberg and stormed away from Prost, who was lurking behind Rosberg, and it really was marvellous stuff. However, the main interest now in the race is whether Piquet can do anything about catching Alain Prost. Prost looked to be secure in second place when Piquet had tyre trouble, but he's some 18 or so seconds behind Prost. He's got fresher rubber on. It's very unlikely that he can do anything to catch him, but I'm sure he'll be having a go.
Well, there is Prost. There is Piquet. You hear the Honda engine, the V6 850 horsepower Honda engine, now extremely fuel efficient as a result of substantial alterations that were made to it about halfway through last season, about this time last season actually, since when the Williams Honda team have literally not looked back, and the new chassis design by Patrick Head allied to that engine has resulted in already this season the Williams team winning 2 out of the 5 races so far, and it looks as though it's going to be 3 out of the 6. 50% winning record in 1986 would be no mean achievement. But let us not forget the McLarens, or Keke Rosberg there, who is in 4th position. By the way, his teammate Alain Prost in 2nd position. So 2 Williams and 2 McLarens share the first 4 places. Mansell leads now on the closing stages of his 65th lap. In 2nd position, Prost. In 3rd position, Piquet. In 4th position, Rosberg. Mansell has lapped everybody up to number 2 there, Keke Rosberg, who is 4th. But in 5th place, lapped, is Ayrton Senna. That's a bit of an indignity for the Brazilian. In 6th position, René Arnoux in the Ligier. In 7th place, jolly old Jacques Lafitte, 42 years old and the oldest man in the race, in 7th place, ahead of Michele Alboreto in the Ferrari, who is 8th, and Martin Brundle is in 9th position. The gap from Prost 2nd to Piquet 3rd is 18 seconds as Nigel Mansell completes a lap and passes Philippe Streff in the Tyrrell.
Yes, and it looks really now as if Piquet is not going to be able to catch Prost, and the leading 4 cars are very much spread out. There you see 21 seconds and then another nearly 20 seconds, 18, and then another 30 seconds back to Rosberg. So they're very spread out. The main interest now is going to be the fuel problems, and if we get anybody who's got overexcited in the early part of the race, run too much boost, because remember that this circuit is high on fuel consumption, and they will all be running marginally, hoping to finish with about a pint left of their 195 litres, and those who misjudge it wrong, of course, don't make the finish line.
So there goes the world champion, Alain Prost, in the McLaren, 2nd place. I don't suppose he'll be too unhappy with that. 6 points to add to the 23 that he already has, giving him 29 altogether, which would mean, of course, that he would be definitely leading the world championship, because Mansell on 9 points to add to the 17 that he has, to the 18 that he has, I'm sorry, would result in 27. But Nigel Mansell looks almost certain to move up to 2nd place in the World Championship, unless, of course, number 6, Nelson Piquet, charging hard on those new rear tyres, very much up to race temperature now, of course, because like all the top teams these days, the teams preheat the tyres in the pits with electric blankets before they put them on the hubs of the cars when they come into the pits. And there is Keke Rosberg in 4th position, the last man not to have been lapped by race leader Nigel Mansell. And Nigel Mansell is now on his 67th lap, 3 laps to go after he's completed this one. You see the white tube flapping about in the front of Keke Rosberg's helmet. That's the drink tube, which they badly need at this circuit, because 192 miles around this brake testing, tyre testing, fuel consumption testing circuit are very, very hard miles indeed. Mansell leads, and here he is, one of those depressing people, Nigel Mansell, who seems to be good at anything he decides he's going to do. He's a qualified engineer. He's got whatever kind of belt it is in karate, pink belt or green belt, or no disrespect to the black belt man. Plays 4 off and golf, flies his own aeroplane, is a qualified helicopter pilot, and a super family man as well. So Nigel Mansell now on lap 68. He is coming out of the pits hairpin. He's done that now. He's travelling at some 180 miles an hour over the ripples of the circuit with their heat mirage. Lap 68 then. Nigel Mansell leads in second position as they start the 69th and last lap but one. Mansell leading, Prost second. In third position, Nelson Piquet, who is slowly catching Prost, but I don't think he's going to do so. In fourth position is Keke Rosberg. Fifth is Ayrton Senna in the points. Sixth, René Arnoux in the points. Seventh is Jacques Lafitte. Eighth is Michele Alboreto. And in ninth position, still going strong, Martin Brundle, finishing soon in the Tyrrell. Down they come. Mansell. Here he is, Nigel Mansell, that distinctive stance of his in the car. He seems to sit much higher up in the car than does Nelson Piquet. And now Nigel comes down into the hairpin to complete his 69th lap and start his 70th and last lap in what has been an absolutely... and takes the checkered flag and shakes his hand in absolute delight. So, Nigel Mansell has won the Canadian Grand Prix, and subject to official confirmation, it's Prost second, Piquet third. Well, Nigel Mansell has made it 4 wins, and as René Arnoux finishes in 5th place, Nigel Mansell can be well and truly delighted.
He certainly can. That has to be the most impressive performance of Nigel's career. He really dominated that race. He had his stamp on it from start to finish, and he judged it perfectly. He did the business right after the pit stop. He'd obviously saved himself enough fuel, and having taken it steadily in the first half, he copied Prost's tactics from Imola, which were the sensible ones, and then he just burnt them up for a few laps after the pit stop, and it was all over. So, a marvellous drive by Nigel Mansell, and this time with no mistakes, and he really has matured dramatically. He's a completely different driver now to the one he was 9 months ago. It started at the Belgian Grand Prix last year when he got lucky. He made 2 mistakes, still finished second, and that seems to bolster his confidence. He then won 2 Grand Prix on the trot, and that helped him. And then the last race recently, again, this little bit of luck and a good result seems to do the trick for Nigel, because he had a lucky win in Belgium a fortnight ago, but there was no help from luck this time. He did it all on his own, and just magnificently.
I will say, John, that I'm very happy for Nigel. All those years of apprenticeship at Lotus, it's kind of a shame in some respects that he can't be experiencing. Speaking about Lotus, there is Ayrton Senna, who has gotten out of his race car. It's kind of a shame in some respects that Nigel couldn't be enjoying all of the success with the Lotus, for whom he spent so many years. But he's with Williams, and it's working just fine. Thank you.
Senna realmente não poderia ter escolhido outro recipiente para beber. Bastante cansado o piloto do Lotus, fez uma volta a menos E é de referir a segunda vitória consecutiva para o britânico Nigel Mansell. Primeiro e terceiro lugares para os Williams Honda, segundo e quarto para o McLaren e, uma vez mais, os Ferraris fora dos pontos.
E um deles não terminando a corrida, que foi o caso do Stefan Johansson.
Nigel Mansell e Alain Prost. Naturalmente satisfeito o britânico da Williams. Piquet marca 4 pontos com o seu terceiro lugar e não perde o contacto com os primeiros na luta do Mundial.
São 9 pontos.
Enquanto que Ayrton Senna, com os seus 2 pontos, mantém intactas todas as suas pretensões em termos de campeonato do mundo. E cá temos os 2 primeiros.
Mansell e Prost.
Deve estar a chegar
o terceiro classificado,
Nelson Piquet. Peter Winter, o jornalista que trabalha para a Williams, que segundo informações que recebemos já teria em Detroit a presença de Frank Williams, depois de um gravíssimo acidente sofrido em estradas de França. Aqui tem primeiro plano do vencedor da corrida, Mansell.
O Nigel Mansell, Adriano, que aos 32 anos começa.
That young Britainer may be taking all of this in stride, but he just won his second Grand Prix in a row. The top 10, Nigel Mansell, Alain Prost, Nelson Piquet, Keke Rosberg, Ayrton Senna unofficially, and René Arnoux. Those first 6, of course, getting World's Championship points, followed by Jacques Lafitte, Michele Alboreto, Martin Brundle, and Alain Jones.
Well, with my mathematics here, I show that Prost is currently in the World Championship at 29 points, and then you have a tie between Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell with 27 points, with Piquet having 18 points by picking up another 4 points here today. The World Championship, one-third of the way through the season, is certainly a very tight battle as we can see it developing throughout the rest of the year. We have Rosberg in 5th place with 14 points, and Jacques Lafitte with 7 points in 6th position, and then comes Stefan Johansson. Unfortunately, he could have gained some very important points here in Canada, but the World Championship is hot and heavy moving into Detroit. If you can make it to the Detroit race, it's one of the best organized events on the Grand Prix trail, and I would recommend for anyone who can get anywhere near that event to travel to Detroit and see one of these things in person.
If the names of Andretti, of which there are 2, Unser, of which there are 2 on occasion, Kogan, Rahal, Sneva, Guerrero, are of interest to you, you're going to want to stay tuned to ESPN today, because we're going out to Portland, Oregon, on the other coast of the North American continent. This will be across the border into the country of the United States of America, where the ESPN signal, of course, originates from, for the IndyCar race from Portland, Oregon this afternoon, out there where Emerson Fittipaldi is sitting on the pole. Also, don't forget to stay with us for the French Grand Prix. The Formula One season continues on ESPN on Sunday, July 6th at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific time. Nelson Piquet will return, of course, along with all the other Formula One stars. Nelson to defend his 1985 crown. The Big Five is going to continue, and can anybody break into the Big Five of 1986? Well, we'll be back with some more thoughts on today's Canadian Grand Prix, where Nigel Mansell has brought home another win for Frank Williams. He and his teammate are having a good year.
Conseguiu esta vitória. Nelson Piquet, depois do Grande Prémio do Brasil, não mais conseguiu ganhar. Esperava-se uma época espetacular do piloto brasileiro, mas os resultados lá de cima não estão a aparecer. Já não foi mau este terceiro lugar, que lhe dá 4 pontos e a continuação de possibilidades de estar na corrida para o Mundial.
Aguarda-se a todo o instante a cerimónia do champanhe, a consagração a Nigel Mansell, Alain Prost e Nelson Piquet, os 3 primeiros classificados deste Grande Prémio de Canadá.
esta bonita vista aérea da ilha de Notre Dame. Que desde há bastante tempo é cenário do Grande Prémio do Canadá, depois de ter sucedido à pista de Mosport. Lá vai Mansell, a habitual troca de boné. Explica-se porque é que se troca de boné. Ora bem, é que este boné tem um dourado na pala que é entregue junto do pódio ao homem que ganha o Grande Prémio. Por isso, a troca dos bonés. Normalmente os pilotos costumam lançar para o público o boné que sobra. E lá temos o pódio constituído por 3 excelentes pilotos. Nigel Mansell, que será talvez o menos credenciado dos 3. Alan Prost, o campeão do mundo. Nelson Piquet, que já foi 2 vezes campeão do mundo. Vamos nos aproximando do final desta transmissão que estivemos a efetuar com imagens diretamente do circuito de Gilles Villeneuve em Montreal, com comentários do José Pinto e meus, aqui da cabine dos estúdios do Lumiar. Vitória de Nigel Mansell, uma vitória incontestável. Segundo lugar, muito bem arrancado por Alan Prost, e também uma excelente corrida por parte de Nelson Piquet, que foi o único piloto dos homens da frente que teve de fazer 2 paragens na box para troca de pneus. Compensou a troca do pneu traseiro esquerdo de Nelson Piquet, numa altura em que houve uma momentânea falha de imagem, que já lá estão os homens no pódio para escutarem os hinos respectivos. Neste caso é só o hino da Grã-Bretanha, porquanto o construtor também é britânico. E nós aproveitamos para nos despedirmos dos senhores espectadores, lembrando-lhes que de hoje a 8 dias, cerca das 18 horas, teremos a transmissão do Grande Prémio dos Estados Unidos, que terá como cenário o circuito citadino de Detroit, a pátria do automóvel norte-americano. Para todos, muito boa tarde. Esperamos que esta transmissão lhes tenha agradado e que tenham seguido bem o desenrolar deste Grande Prémio do Canadá. Pela nossa parte, muito boa tarde. Obrigado pela atenção que quiseram dispensar. Boa tarde.
Mademoiselle Grand-Prix, Lucie Dorion. Maintenant, Monsieur Desjardins présente au gagnant le trophée Gilles Villeneuve. Now, Mr. Desjardins presents the Gilles Villeneuve Trophy to the winner. Voici maintenant l'hymne national du pays, représenté par le vainqueur Nigel Mansell. Et maintenant, le champagne pour le vainqueur. Les bouteilles de champagne. Et merci, mesdames, messieurs. Encore une fois, félicitations au gagnant, Nigel Mansell.
Voilà, mesdames, messieurs, le grand vainqueur du Grand Prix Labatt du Canada, édition 1986, le Britannique Nigel Mansell, au volant d'une Williams Honda suivie.
Victory in Canada then for the second race in succession for Nigel Mansell, with Alain Prost second, Nelson Piquet third, Keke Rosberg fourth, Ayrton Senna fifth and René Arnoux in sixth place. And that means to say that in the Drivers' Championship, Alain Prost now leads by 2 points from a tie for second between Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell, with Nelson Piquet in fourth place and Keke Rosberg fifth. In the Constructors' Championship, Williams and McLaren have changed places, with Williams now 1 point ahead. Third, Lotus, fourth, Ligier, and fifth, Ferrari. And undoubtedly, the man of the race, Nigel Mansell.
The thing is, I've got a fantastic pit crew. They're a marvellous team. Look at the effort for the pit stop that they did. The information I get is second to none. We had the race under control from the point of view we knew how quick we could go. And if that was quick enough to win the race, then we would win. And the speed that Keke was going, I think, after about a third distance, I couldn't keep that pace, so I just had to sit there and be patient for about 5 or 6 laps until we were on the correct side again, and then we were able to push, and it was good.
How frustrating is it to a real racer like yourself to have to pull back a little?
Well, you have to pull back not only for the fuel, but for the tyres as well. It's Grand-Prix racing, that's what it's all about, conserving your tyres, your brakes, your car, yourself, and the engine and the fuel. And it's the same for everybody. So at the end of the day, it's the best team who does the best job and the best driver at that particular time that gets the job done.
Now, you're only 2 points now behind the reigning world champion Alain Prost. I mean, did you expect at the beginning of this season to be so close with a third of the season gone?
I'm not thinking about it. I mean, I've had a couple of races I haven't been able to finish this year through whatever reasons, and I'm just delighted to be up there pitching in, and I'm looking forward, and I'm very quietly optimistic that at every race this year we'll be pitching in there, and if we've got enough points at the end of the year, who knows.
So next weekend at Detroit, Nigel Mansell in his present winning form could do the hat-trick.
McLaren, Williams McLaren. Mansell wins, Prost second, Piquet third, Rosberg fourth, with Ayrton Senna and René Arnoux fifth and sixth, a lap down, and that's going to leave the World Championship in a fascinating position. What a wonderful drive for Britain's Nigel Mansell.
Nigel, congratulations, a fantastic win today. At times it looked as though it was easy, would you say so?
Oh boy, you should have been in the car. It wasn't easy, no, very difficult.
You had a fairly comfortable lead at the end in particular. Did you have any fuel worries then?
I had fuel worries at the beginning, that's why Keke caught me, and it was very, very difficult to be able to slow down that much so they could overtake me. But I was conserving fuel in second place, and then we got the right side again, I was able to push. But what I was able to do with the fantastic pit stop was to build up, I think, about 10 or 15 second cushion, and then it was just a question of maintaining it. But I mean, the team did a fantastic job for me.
In comparison to Spa, how does this victory rate?
It just gets better and better. I mean, you know, every victory carries more momentum, and I mean, as I said, the team, I didn't think the team could do as good a pit stop here as they did in Spa, and I think I know the time was 7.8 seconds, but it felt like about 4.8 seconds.
And absolutely no problems with the car at all?
Yes, we had problems, but nothing that I'd admit to. Perhaps one thing I'd admit to at the end is my leg was aching because the brakes were not stopping as well as they should have done. The pedal was very hard, but that was only a temperature problem.
A fantastic win. Well done, Nigel.
A fantastic win indeed, and it's put Nigel into joint second place in the Drivers' World Championship. Alain Prost goes back into the lead by virtue of his 6 points for his second place. And Ayrton Senna, only scoring 2, has to make do with joint second with Nigel Mansell. Piquet is fourth, Rosberg fifth, and Johansson and Lafitte share sixth place. In the Constructors' Championship, Williams Honda go back into the lead by 3 points from McLaren, with Lotus third and Ligier fourth. A great day in Montreal, and we've only got a week to wait before the next race, just over the American border in Detroit, for the Detroit Grand Prix. Round the houses. Join us there.